Hey everyone. So today I wanted to discuss something that may be affecting you. It may be under the level of your awareness. Chronic systemic threat perception. Now, this is something that if it's going on with you, it could be affecting more than just your physical health. It could be affecting your decisions, your energy. It could be causing you to procrastinate, and it might even prevent your healing. So, full disclosure, this is a name I made up myself, CSTP. And why did I do that? Am I trying to coin a new phrase? Am I trying to get one over on people, create my own diagnosis, maybe get a little fame? Maybe it'll be named after me? Not exactly. The reason I made it up is because I feel like it's just more descriptive than what this thing is actually called. So, what we're referring to here is nervous system dysregulation. Now, you may or may not have heard of that. That is one of those things you will not find it in a diagnostic manual, but it exists for people. We're talking about something that presents as a syndrome, a cluster of different symptoms that you can see in people. And those symptoms are things that you may be aware of. Chronically being in fight or flight mode, impaired memory and mental acuity, impaired recovery. If you exercise, you might find yourself exhausted and you can't rebound quickly. A heightened reactivity to minor stressors. Imagine that the same kind of input that years ago you might have brushed off might be difficult now. It might cause some symptoms or what we call somatics. Sleep disturbances, stomach issues, anxiety or trauma-related responses, difficulty regulating your own emotions. Like imagine just crying at things that you didn't find yourself crying about, even if it's just a little bit, and have a sense that, well, you're not even really sad necessarily, but just maybe a particular note on a song was hit, or you're watching a commercial. And I don't mean those commercials about the dogs, with the dogs who are going to be murdered unless you do something to support them. Those are designed to make you cry. Those you should cry. If you don't, there's something wrong. Those commercials, they do too good a job, right? Because those commercials, nobody watches it. You have to turn the channel right away. But I digress. Let's get back to what we're talking to. So again, what we're talking about is a conglomeration of symptoms that all point to one thing, which is that your body, and more specifically, the regulatory mechanism of your body, your nervous system, is not working properly. Let's remember, we are self-healing, self-regulating beings or bodies, machines, right? That's how the whole system is designed. But what if there's something wrong with that instrument of regulation? And that can happen. And I'm not talking about a diagnosable kind of anxiety or depression or PTSD. I'm talking about a full body state where your nervous system is so acutely aware and has gotten so used to danger that it doesn't even wait for an actual threat. It's stuck in survival mode. Your system assumes that the threat is there, and it might maximize even small, tiny threats. You could be calm on the outside, but still your system is scanning. And at the littlest provocation, it will release adrenaline and cortisol, right? The adrenal hormones that are designed to be released when a tiger is in the room stalking you. So you might be thinking, well, this resembles me. And maybe it does. And maybe you've heard it called something like sympathetic dominance, right? When that means that the part of your nervous system that regulates kind of immediate short term projects. Get away from that tiger, you know, uh, avoid that dark alley where you see shady people. All right. I mean, that kind of rush of adrenaline, which could actually be fun in certain contexts. If it's happening chronically, then we have a problem. Now, why do we have a problem when it's happening chronically besides the obvious? Right? But let's talk about systemically, because when this happens, when your body and your mind and they are connected, right? We will create dangerous scenarios when they don't necessarily exist. We will misperceive things to believe and convince ourselves that these are threats to survival when they're not. There are enough actual threats to survival, but the human mind can actually misperceive and think that a lot of things are. And this is also, you can kind of include this in with the umbrella of symptoms that you might experience, right? Because it's, how would you distinguish if this is purely a physical thing, a physiological state of hyper awareness, or if it's a psychological thing? I mean, good luck parsing that. Good luck separating that spaghetti. But the problem with being in a constant survival mode, being stuck in that state, is that over time it can rewire the body. There's something fascinating that happens with the nervous system. And some of you have heard of it. And they call it neuroplasticity, right? This is the ability of the nervous system to kind of reform and rewire itself. It's an amazing thing. It's very useful when people have strokes. The brain reorganizes. And that's why you'll see people who maybe they couldn't speak very well after having a stroke, or maybe a side of their face or their body was paralyzed, but then months later, they're showing up normally again. So it's a really fantastically adaptable system, but it can go the other way. These plastic changes can happen in your nervous system as a response to living in this hyper aware, hyper fight or flight dominant state. And that's why maybe you're not digesting properly. Maybe you find that you're bloated a lot, or you get diarrhea, and your sleep is not deep. You don't wake up feeling rested, or you lose energy or desire, or losing friends, because who wants to socialize in that state? There's all kinds of emotional and psychological sequelae to this, because again, this is a systemic thing. And people are so quick to blame and judge themselves. But again, we're talking about the machine and how the machine affects the person. There is a relationship there. It's hard to imagine that you can be in a state like this and not have it affect you psychologically and emotionally. And so if you find that you're less patient with people, and maybe you're losing friends, maybe you don't have as many friends as before, then this could be happening. So where does it come from? Well, sometimes it's obvious, right? Sometimes there's a major trauma or a chronic illness or a loss that just takes your breath away. And sometimes it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? What you might call micro stressors. By the way, let me define stress for you now, because it's such a vague kind of a catch-all term. that we can be confused by it. So for our purposes, stress is anything that causes a response from the body. And in particular, it causes a response by the adrenal glands and by this part of the nervous system, whose job it is to react and keep you surviving in acute and acutely dangerous situations. Does that make sense? In other words, if we're looking at it physiologically, we don't have to define it by some kind of a judgment, by saying, okay, well, my job is a stressor, and my divorce is a stressor, and all those things probably are. But if we look at it just purely physiologically, if the adrenal glands are activated and they start producing adrenaline and cortisol, which are these two chemicals, these two hormones that are designed to help you in stressful situations, then we can consider that whatever it was that caused that, whether it is that tiger or it's your own mind, that thing is a stressor. And that is what stress is for our purposes. And you might notice how you feel. You might notice that there was someone who before you found mildly annoying, and now you dread seeing that person. And when you see them, you get into this hyperactive, sympathetic state. And again, sympathetic here means the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight part of the nervous system. Now, as part of these death by 1,000 cuts, we could be talking about things like constant environmental noise. We live in the New York area. Most of the people listening. I mean, for all I know, there are people listening to me in Indonesia. And those people probably don't have all the stress that we have from the ambient noise that exists in the New York area. I mean, here's an interesting example, although it's kind of a weird example. My grandparents lived on Queens Boulevard. Have you ever tried sleeping next to Queens Boulevard? Queens Boulevard is one of the busiest thoroughfares in New York, and all night there are cars going by, there are alarms, people are beeping, you might hear fights outside. I mean, it's really not a place that kind of encourages serenity. The odd thing about it is that when they would come out to visit us in the suburbs, which they refer to as the country, they had trouble sleeping because their bodies had gotten so attuned to all of that noise from Queens Boulevard. It's just an interesting, I guess, adaptation, and it really has very little to do with our story here, because we are talking about things that would prevent us from sleeping or from responding properly, where I guess to them, they'd reversed it somehow. Okay. Poor nutrition is a chronic stressor, isn't it? At least if you're doing it chronically. You're constantly putting things into your body that are not healthful, that are not nutritious, that are causing a response from your body. And not a good response, an aberrant response, a stress-like response. Okay. How about piled up decisions we haven't made? Things that are pending, and we know we need to figure it out, but we're really kind of stuck in an indecisive state. I mean, that's a stressor right there, potentially. As is unfinished business of all kinds. Maybe with people, maybe there's a conversation you need to have with somebody. That could be stressful for you. Maybe you have a boss at work who is just mean and nasty. And he's not the kind to uplift and encourage. He is the kind to suppress you. That could be another example of a stressor. That's a very powerful one. Okay? But here's what we need to understand is that all of these different things, these stressors, whether they be physical, chemical, or emotional, they get into the body. They're all inputs. And what that can do is that can cause a chronic state of fight or flight. The mechanisms are interesting themselves, right? We talked about adrenaline. So if that adrenaline is constantly coursing, right, ultimately that will cause things like inflammation, which itself is a systemic stressor. That will cause fat to be deposited around your gut. Okay. In the meantime, you're getting these other kinds of signals as well, the nervous system that is now on full alert. So over the long haul, when you're in that state, now you get these plastic changes. And now you find that you're not handling things well. And maybe the world seems too big and too chaotic. And it just becomes this loop where not only do you feel unsafe and maybe you withdraw, but you also are having these symptoms, this chronic inflammation that's like little fires causing damage and destruction to your tissues and your blood vessels and your joints potentially. And you find that you're bloated all the time and you get occasional diarrhea. And that could be a precursor itself. Being in a chronic inflammation state is a great way to become obese, for example. It's a great way to develop autonomic difficulties. So everything works together, but I want you to understand the mechanism of this so you can be empowered to do something. Because the pain that you're feeling in your joints might trace back to this CSTP, this new condition that I've made up. No, I just renamed it. Again, nervous system dysregulation. There are other fancier names that you can call it in, syndromes that might be related, and we don't have to get into all of that Greek and Latin. All right, but just understand what happens to a body under a chronic stress and perceiving a chronic stress. And I got to tell you, that part, the perception part, is really fascinating and extremely important. Because you might find that it's just a pattern, it's just a habit to be hyper focused and hyper aware and hyper concerned about your own survival, even when it may not be warranted. And you might see this in other people. Like, why are they reacting this way? There's very little at stake right here. There's very little that can go wrong, but you imagine things that can go wrong. And then that gets into your body again, and it sensitizes you in ways that are suboptimal. So the question then is how to begin to reset it. And this is the difficult part. This is the part that people don't like because it's slow, unfortunately. We can't force our way out. This systemic issue will not yield to will. You have to gently address the stressors wherever they come from. You want to eliminate the stressors. So here's the strategy, right? Here's the big picture strategy. Eliminate the stressors that you can, be they physical, chemical, emotional, environmental. And you have to give your body and yourself safety cues. Now that sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? Like, what are safety cues? Well, just as there are conditions that will suggest to your body and yourself that you're in danger, That could be done also to suggest that you are safe and that your survival is not imperiled. What does this? Well, we know what does this. Many of us have patterns and habits that we've developed around this. Eating does this. Eating carbs does this. It activates the other part of the nervous system, the part we call the parasympathetics. Parasympathetics, unlike the sympathetic nervous system, which again is immediate responses, right? Fast projects to keep you surviving. The parasympathetics are the slow projects. It's sometimes called the feed and breathe system. So if you eat some comfort food, that can activate your parasympathetics. Warmth makes us feel safe. Laying on the couch, watching Netflix and having one of those fuzzy blankets. That's a safety cue. There is, I must warn you, a double-edged sword when it comes to these safety cues, is that they can be sort of addicting. There's a balance there. You know, laying on your couch and watching the Netflix and eating the popcorn is great if you do it occasionally. But if you're doing it constantly, well, now we have idleness, which is its own kind of stressor. We have the calories and the chemicals possibly from the popcorn. And then we'll build up a kind of inertia that's hard to get out of because it feels safe. So, of course, we would want to do it. So I think that's true about a lot of the strategies that you can employ that will give those safety cues. So just keep that in mind, okay? When we're looking at this larger picture here and how to address it. First of all, finding out what are those things that cause us to go into that sympathetic state. And unfortunately, it might take some effort and energy to address these things. And maybe we don't have a lot of that. Because, as we said, we are suffering from this CSTP. So how do you begin resetting? Again, it's gentle. Move gently. Some people, for example, will do yoga. And that's a more formalized thing, as is Tai Chi. But just any kind of gentle moving. And there's a reason I phrase it that way, which is because the tendency tends to be abrupt changes. Right? I mean, we want a quick fix. First, realize you're stuck in a survival mode condition. Then address it in a gradual and gentle way. So walking is one of the greatest things you can do, especially if you're walking in nature. It helps less if you're walking in a dangerous area. But, a walk where there's trees, that can be extremely healing. You'll notice you think better, both in quality and quantity. Your thoughts will slow down as your breathing returns. And maybe the quality of the thoughts will also improve. It'll be like, hey, maybe this is not so overwhelming. Maybe I can handle this particular problem. Okay. Eat foods that signal to you abundance and calm, but that are not just purely comfort food devoid of nutrition. So things like soups and stews, but that are made with healthful ingredients that are also going to nourish your cells. and they won't be too harsh on your body, especially your GI tract. Handle something that you can handle, like a backlog, we sometimes call it. Do one a day. All right, things that you've been putting off that you might have some attention on, because that attention will start to stalk you after a while. Okay. Now, this is sounding almost metaphysical, but what are we going to do? We're going to just avoid the laws of the body and how it works? No. I don't mind being a little guru-ish. I'll go there. Avoid things that feel like safety and security, but really aren't. And the classical example here is alcohol. And I apologize because I know that's a very popular strategy. But it's another stressor that fools us. Scrolling too much, doom scrolling, that's a thing. We cannot swallow the world whole. Trust me on that. There are several wars happening right now. They are upsetting as hell. Don't scroll too much. Give yourself a time limit. Okay. And again, we spoke about the possibility of idleness before. This is a comfort up to a point. After that, it's paralysis. It's hiding. Give your body clear signals that it's not in a war. I once had a situation with a family member. We were actually at a restaurant, and this family member had a situation going on in their lives, and they started hyperventilating, just in a real bad state. And so I brought her outside, and we were in the parking lot, and we started walking around the parking lot. And I started giving her instructions, right? Like, look at that car. All right, good. Now go ahead and touch that light post. Okay, excellent. Look up at the sky. Okay, good. Locate 3 stars. I mean, it was like that. And after about 15 minutes, she took a deep breath, looked at me and said, "Thank you," and hugged me. She was in a very acute state, and it wasn't just her mind, though it was her mind, certainly, but it was her whole system. And just this gentle directing of attention and getting outside of her own head was very helpful to her. Okay. So that would be an example of signals that things are okay, that, not everything is dangerous. Remind yourself that your survival is a fact. Right now, you exist. You might have perilous situations going on in your life, and situations that feel perilous, maybe more than they actually are. But you're here. So it's not just about believing that you're safe. It's about you and your body knowing that your environment is not attacking you. So part of the reason I talk about it is because I've lived it. I still live pieces of it. We're still in this world, right? And the world is certainly weird. We've talked about that a bunch over the years. And it's not anyone's fault. It is your mission, though, right? Not your fault, but your mission to break that loop. And you can do it. You can do it as long as you're gentle and patient. We didn't talk about nutritional supplementation, but that can obviously be very helpful. What I do can be helpful, shameless plug, and it could be helpful to have someone else to talk to. So understand the pattern. Understand that if you are in that stuck place, it's not a matter of your character. It's systemic overload, and it's a response that anyone could have given certain circumstances. And if this message hits home, then send me a message. So thank you for listening today. I will be with you again next week, and have a terrific week. Take care.